No one could have foreseen this. A trap was sprung at dawn, 5:57 a.m. on the 12th of July 2025. The Baltic Sea was shrouded in a cold mist. Waves whispered against the steel hulls below. High in the sky, a lone U.S. Navy F divided by A-18E Super Hornet patrolled at 12,000 feet. Its pilot, Lieutenant Jack Reynolds, was scanning a radar screen that showed nothing but silence. However, silence was the cruelest deception. From the coast near Kaliningrad, Russian S-400 missile batteries had activated. The gravestone radar locked on like the eyes of a predator. In less than a breath, 48 N-6 missiles were fired, tearing upwards in columns of white fire. Their roar ripped through the morning sky. Inside the cockpit, Reynolds felt the seat vibrate, followed by the piercing scream of a radar lock. He banked sharply to the left, but it was too late. The first missile detonated near his left wing, shattering the airflow. Shrapnel tore through the fuselage. Alarms blared and blood ran down his temple as his head slammed against the HUD. Smoke filled the cockpit, blurring his vision. One of his hands went numb, the other gripped the control stick with desperate strength. He activated the Mayday, his voice trembling, but the jet was no longer a weapon. It had become a steel coffin. As his Super Hornet spiraled downwards, Reynolds pulled the ejection handle. The cockpit canopy blew. The jet crashed into the sea, and he floated on his raft, watching the trail of smoke still lingering in the gray sky. This was not an accident. Someone had chosen to pull the trigger, and America would not remain silent. 6:28 a.m. Washington, D.C. The Pentagon's underground press room glowed in a cold light. On the main screen, satellite imagery confirmed the wreckage. An American Super Hornet was burning on the waves of the Baltic. No warning, no mistake. This was a deliberate act. "We will respond," a general declared in a curt tone, his voice as sharp as a knife. The silence they knew would be surrender. Options flashed across the table. Submarine-launched cruise missiles, long-range bombers, cyber attacks, all were dismissed. Too predictable, too slow. The enemy would shrug them off with contempt. What America needed was precision, an answer written in steel and fire. All eyes turned to a single solution: the F-35 Sea Lightning II, America's stealth predator. A weapon built not just to survive, but to strike directly at the heart of an air defense system. The mission: infiltrate Russian airspace, eliminate the electronic warfare center in Kaliningrad, and blind their entire northern shield. On the deck of the USS George H.W. Bush, pilots prepared, engines spooled up, weapons were loaded. AGM-158 JASSMs, radar jamming pods. Stealth configuration was locked. Tonight, there would be no warning shots. This was not revenge. It was a message. Whoever fired on an American pilot had lit the fuse, and the next move would decide the balance of power in the Baltic skies. 7:11 a.m. Baltic Sea. The deck of the USS George H.W. Bush trembled under the roar of engines. Steam billowed from the catapults as the deck crew signaled in silence. Then came the sound, a roar of raw power, as the F-35 Sea Lightning II, call sign Ghost 1, hurtled down the runway. In the cockpit, Captain Mason Cole felt the G-force press him back into his seat. He kept his eyes steady, his hands locked on the control stick. This was not just another patrol. This was a hunt inside enemy airspace. The jet descended, skimming just 50 feet above the cold sea. Stealth profile was activated. Radar screens across Kaliningrad flickered faintly, but each time, Ghost 1 vanished like a phantom in the fog. Beside him, an EA-18G Growler spewed electronic jamming pulses, throwing the enemy's radar into chaos. Each transmission was a gamble. Too much, and they would know. Too little, and they would see him. Inside his helmet, Mason's breathing slowed. One wrong move, and the sky would swallow him. Ahead lay the most dangerous airspace in Europe, guarded by S-400 seconds, Panzers, and a dense radar grid. And he was flying straight into its jaws. This was America's answer: silent, sharp, unstoppable. 7:37 a.m. airspace north of Kaliningrad. Ghost 1 flew low, hugging the sea like a phantom. Each wave crest seemed close enough to scrape his wingtips. Inside his helmet, Mason Cole's display flickered with warning icons that blinked and then disappeared. The enemy's radar was searching, hunting. Suddenly, a faint sweep of a beam touched the jet's sensors. The Russian gravestone radar had caught a trace. Mason's heart rate spiked. He pulled tighter to the terrain, skimming past cliffs as the EA-18G Growler surged forward, unleashing waves of electronic static. The radar was blinded, but the blindness never lasted. UAV, 6 o'clock, a voice crackled through his comm system. Above, a Russian reconnaissance drone glided silently, scanning the Baltic horizon. One wrong turn and the mission would collapse. Mason banked hard, diving into a narrow valley of clouds. The UAV passed overhead, no alarm. He had escaped death's grasp. The fuel warning flashed. A KC-46 Pegasus tanker was waiting in contested skies, its shadow almost invisible. Low-altitude aerial refueling was madness, but without it, the attack would die before reaching its target. Mason held steady, hands firm, nerves of steel. Fuel surged for 90 seconds of exposure that felt like 90 years. Now alone, the Growler fell back. Ghost 1 glided forward, a single blade aimed at the lion's throat. Ahead lay the electronic heart of Russia's defense system. One man, one jet, one chance. 8:02 a.m. Less than 20 miles from Kaliningrad, the coastline emerged ahead, jagged and grim. Beneath layers of civilian buildings was Russia's Electronic Warfare Command, the brain that sent orders to every missile and radar on the Baltic front. Mason Cole knew if he took it out, the entire northern sky would go blind. He banked slightly left, aligning his HUD with the coordinates. The target symbol turned from red to amber, amber to green. Lock confirmed. 2 AGM-158 JASSMs were armed, their wings ready to deploy. His thumb hovered over the release button, but the Russians were not blind. The gravestone radar lit up like a thunderstorm. Alarms screamed in Mason's headset as 4 8N-6DM missiles spewed from their launchers, burning bright. At the same time, Panzer cannons on the coast unleashed a barrage of shells, stitching the sky with steel. The F-35 shuddered under the shockwaves. Mason rolled hard, G-forces slamming him into his seat. Blood rushed to his head, his vision narrowed. Yet, his grip never wavered. Survive. Hold the target. Streaks of missiles flew past his canopy, close enough to shake the airframe. One wrong twitch and ghost. One would vanish in flames. Yet, the target marker still blinked green. The window was closing, maybe seconds or less. This was not just an attack. It was survival against a storm of steel. 8:07 a.m. The Baltic sky lit up with fire. 2 Russian missiles flew straight towards Ghost 1, their exhausts glowing white against the dawn sky. Mason Cole's HUD screamed, "Impact! Warning in 6 seconds." There was no more time to think. He hit the release button. Thunk. 2 AGM-158 JASSMs activated instantly, their wings unfolding like a predator's talons. They dove towards the Kaliningrad command center, their guidance locked with surgical precision. The moment they left his wings, Mason yanked the control stick into a violent split-S maneuver. The F-35 flipped inverted, rolled, and dived. The G-force crushed his chest, his vision blurred. Blood rushed to his skull. Behind him, the Russian missiles corrected, but the angle was too sharp. One detonated in midair, exploding into a fireball. The other lost its lock, disappearing in a useless arc. Mason's jet skimmed the treetops at breathtaking speed, the roar of cannon fire still chasing him. Sparks flashed as tracer rounds tore through the sky, but Ghost 1 had slipped beneath the radar canopy, hidden in speed and silence. Above Kaliningrad, the 2 JASSMs roared down. One targeted the command level, the other the backup data storage. A heartbeat later, the city shook as twin explosions ripped through the underground bunker. The electronic brain of Russia's Baltic defense system was gone, erased in less than 15 seconds. Mason didn't look back. He couldn't. Survival meant moving forward. 8:19 a.m. The earth was still shaking from the double impact. Over Kaliningrad, smoke and fire spewed into the sky, twisting into a black column that satellites recorded in chilling detail. Where hundreds of operators had once coordinated radar locks and missiles, there was now only rubble and silence. Across Russia's western front, chaos spread. S-400 arrays flickered, their targeting data severed. Panzer launchers spun aimlessly, scanning empty skies like blind predators. Coastal radars switched to manual mode. Slow, clumsy, almost useless. A battlefield once filled with precision, now fought in the dark. From Brussels to Warsaw, NATO screens lit up with the same conclusion. The Baltic corridor had been opened. Commanders whispered, then declared publicly, "This is more than an attack. It's a shift in the balance." Patrol zones were expanded, destroyers were repositioned, air assets surged, filling the gap Ghost 1 had created. On board the USS George H.W. Bush, Mason Cole exhaled for the first time in minutes. His body trembled, sweat dripped inside his helmet. But he was alive, and carrying the proof that America had answered. This was not a small victory. It was a warning, a message carved in steel and fire. Cross the line, and you will lose the nervous system of the battlefield. 8:45 a.m., Moscow. Inside the Kremlin, the war rooms were silent. Screens showed nothing but static where the Baltic Air Defense Network data used to be. No generals held press conferences. No official statements were broadcast. For 36 hours, Russia's capital projected nothing but silence. But the silence itself was louder than any threat. Across Europe, that silence bred fear. In Warsaw, military leaders demanded more NATO warships in the Baltic. In Berlin, emergency sessions debated expanding missile defenses. Romania moved its destroyers closer to northern shipping lanes, protecting the commercial lifeblood that flowed through contested waters. In Washington, the message was clear. The American strike had broken more than steel. It had shattered an image of invincibility. Ghost 1's 2 bombs had reset the balance of power in less than 20 seconds. But for Moscow, humiliation was not the end. It was fuel. Spies whispered of a retaliation already taking shape, a storm gathering beneath the quiet surface. What form it would take, no one knew. Cyber warfare, submarine patrols, another missile strike, every possibility hung heavy in the air. The world held its breath. 9:30 a.m., the outskirts of Kaliningrad. Satellite feeds showed convoys of Russian missile trucks moving under camouflage nets. Submarine signals surged in the Baltic waters, their acoustic shadows detected by NATO sonar. In the digital realm, probing cyber attacks suddenly rippled across Western power grids. Moscow's silence was over. Retaliation was taking shape. At NATO headquarters in Brussels, urgency spiked, generals argued. Should they reinforce the skies with more jets or prepare missile defenses across Poland and Lithuania? One wrong move could ignite a full-scale war. A step back could hand Russia the initiative. Aboard the USS George H.W. Bush, Mason Cole sat alone in the ready room, his helmet on the table, his body aching, but his mind was unbroken. He knew this wasn't over. Ghost 1's strike had torn a wound, but the wound demanded an answer. His mission had crippled their radar. Yet now he feared the price of victory. In Washington, the president's advisors weighed 2 folders: escalation or containment, launch more strikes and risk all-out war, hold back and invite Moscow's claws to sink deeper into Europe. Both paths led into the fire. The world was on a knife's edge. One spark could start a storm no one could control. 10:15 a.m. The Baltic Sea was quiet again. But it was a quiet that hid a storm. In less than an hour, a Super Hornet had fallen, an F-35C had struck back, and an entire northern air defense grid had been neutralized. Steel had clashed, fire had roared, and yet the world had learned something much deeper. War was no longer fought just with armies. It was fought with nerve, timing, and the willingness to risk everything in a single heartbeat. For Russia, the loss was more than a command center. It was the shattering of an image that their fortress was impenetrable. For America, the victory came with a price. A pilot's life nearly lost, the shadow of escalation looming. And for NATO, the lesson was clear. Unity had to be more than a word. Without it, even the most powerful jet was just a lone bird in a hostile sky. But beyond the tactics, beyond the missiles, there was a truth no radar could detect. Every strike echoes in human lives. Every explosion leaves families waiting, and every quiet retaliation risks opening wounds that only peace can heal. Power may win the skies, but only wisdom can win the future. The world was watching. The next move wasn't just about borders or missiles. It was about whether we choose to continue writing history with fire, or finally, with peace.